Ms. Ambassador, thank you very much for this opportunity. Today we are going to talk about democracy during the times of COVID-19. Coronavirus outbreak presents a range of new challenges to democracy and human rights. Since the coronavirus outbreak began, the condition of human rights and democracy has grown worse in more than 80 countries. Are there any projects that will help to have a better condition of human rights and to help us disrupt that problem?
Well, I think COVID was really a challenge for all of us worldwide, and it is difficult to cope with such a big problem in order to keep the people safe. So the European Union attaches great importance to human rights and also to have the freedom of each individual in the European Union and in all our member states and partner countries. However, you see, in such a challenging situation, we have to make a difference between individual problems that popped up. I totally agree. We can see an increase in domestic violence in a lot of countries, and this is a challenge due to the COVID situation and the lockdown we had in many of our countries. And there we have to find methods really to target this problem. So here in Armenia, it would be important to have a law that really takes up the problem of domestic violence. But there are other elements which are meant for the safety and security of the whole population. Naturally, if you have a curfew, like we had in many of our countries, this means a restriction of individual rights. But this is meant in order to protect everybody, and this is naturally meant for a certain period. So I would say it is always a question to discuss whether this is compatible with the constitution of the country, and I think the discussion goes also on here in Armenia. In Armenia, I think you kept most of the key freedoms. You had a very short lockdown, and if you ask me privately, I would say I would have liked to see a stricter implementation of the rules that were set up, which still are rather mild compared to other countries. But this is also only done in order to safeguard the health of all of us and not only of the individual. And we have to look, which is very important, after kids. I think this is in all our countries a task we have, because this can affect the mental health of children when they are forced to stay at home and schools are closed. It can have an effect, and I think there we are trying to do something together with UNICEF. We try to support vulnerable families, and we stand ready to do more. We are having a human rights dialogue every year, and we had it also this year in May, where we discuss all topics that are relevant in order to have a good human rights record. And what is important, for example, and I wonder whether people really value it enough, that in the middle of this COVID crisis and on top of the outcome of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, with all the traumatization and losses, you had free and fair and credible elections. And this is something which at least the European Union values and sees as a really important step to democratization and really respect for human rights in your country.
Ms. Ambassador, thank you for your answer. Governments usually respond in abuses of force, like usually silencing activists, weakening some important institutions. Military system usually uses COVID-19 as an opportunity to repress some political activists, journalists, lawyers, arresting of dozens, I mean, in the world. What do you think? How can all this be controlled?
Well, I think it is a responsibility of each state, and you said one right sentence. It is, let's say, in a democracy, it is more difficult and easier, because in a democracy you have civil society observing what happens to human rights, and also unnecessary arrest will be tackled and will be raised as a problem. In a dictatorship, it is much easier to silence people or to bring them into prison. So what do? We follow the situation in our partner countries and we raise them. If we see some problems, if we see that there are really attacks and restrictions of fundamental freedoms, we discuss it and we try to find a solution together with the country, but we will not ignore it. But let's say certain restrictions which are meant and which happened in all our countries, which are meant to support, let's say, the safety of the population, they are meant for a certain period. The question is, will they remain? When they remain, I think we have to stand up and target this. And on the freedom of media, because this is always mentioned that journalists are put under pressure. You see, COVID-19 showed us one thing, and this is not only here in Armenia, it's worldwide. And especially we also face disinformation, misinformation, fake news in the European Union. This is very difficult. While you try to convince your population to follow the rules, to get vaccinated, you see the most incredible fake news spreading around. And this you have to target. And I think this is what we do here together with our partners, also with WHO. This means fact-checking, telling people what are the informations that are needed to make a decision, but also trying to convince people to go the way to get vaccinated. And this I see in certain media and social media, that this is meant to be a dominance over the free will of people. And there I totally disagree, because we have to really get vaccinated in order to overcome this pandemic together, and people who are using this misinformation, they are a challenge for the whole society. So I'm very much to support the freedom of media. The European Union is having programs exactly to support independent and investigative journalists in this country, and also to work on media literacy. But the moment these false information are spread to put the people under pressure and in fear, I think we have to contradict together. Government, society, and we will join them when we are asked.
Actually, many experts note that there is a fear that most of the laws that were passed during COVID-19 period and were aimed to control some processes, some activities, will still remain in force even after overcoming coronavirus. What do you think? Is there any risk of that?
Well, I would say, also I speak now about Armenia, yeah? I have the impression that your government is very committed to a reform cause, that it attaches great importance to human rights and rule of law. So I don't see that you have many laws that were changed, especially due to COVID. And I think these restrictions, and you have much less, also sometimes the international community would even say more would be needed. I don't think that there is this danger. There is a certain difficulty in this country with disinformation. This is a challenge. And I would like to see more confidence of the people in, let's say, this democratic reform course your country has chosen. And this is also acknowledged by international observers. So, but it is always the civil society who can raise the voice and say, here are things that need to be observed and here are things that need to be changed.
Coming back to the democratic crisis, millions of people lost their jobs because of COVID-19. Like, this was not only an economic crisis but also democratic crisis. Are there any initiatives of European Union that will help these people to survive?
I think this we already did, because as I said, we have a package of 92 million. We started last year during the beginning of the COVID crisis. We are supporting small and medium-sized companies. We give grants in order to help people to survive. We are supporting vulnerable families. We are in close contact with the government to work now on, let's say, the future programs to really bring the country back on track, to develop the economy, to work on social protection. So the European Union is quite active, not only here in Yerevan, but we are also supporting the regional development in different masses, and we try to react directly to the needs, and this means in this country naturally also the outcome of the conflict in Karabakh, and to support displaced persons. We had directly initiated humanitarian assistance, so I think the European Union is quite active in your country.
Miss Ambassador, thank you very much for the interview. It was quite interesting for me. Hope to have other interviews with you on the other topics as well in the future.
Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best personally.
Thank you.